And then I really got to reflecting. And I'm thinking, wait a minute. If this is terrible, if this is bad, then I'm way worse than these two. Possibly God knows this, which is why I have very limited resources, no success, and no opportunity. So I'm kind of protected in that way. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the podcast. You are listening to Convert Me Podcast. My name is Scott Espinda, and I am doing this podcast because I am a recent baptized member of the church, a new follower of Christ. I've always considered myself Christian, spiritual / religious. Whenever someone asks you, oh, what are you, what's your religion? And a lot of times I'm like, yeah, I'm Christian, and I didn't know exactly what that meant, To me, I'm saying, yeah, I believe in Jesus Christ. But at the same time, it was almost like a half answer. Like, you say you believe in something, but what you do is completely different. And to be honest, I haven't gotten away from that bad habit of saying something, turning around and doing another. But I did take that one step that has helped me increase my spirituality, which is getting baptized. And I really wanted to get this podcast down because, now I'm talking with my friends who I knew before this life. And I say this life because that's what it's like. I often think, what was I doing before I started going to church, before I started getting baptized? What in the world was I doing? And I'll tell you right now, I can't answer you that. Because it was nothing. It was absolutely, my life began when it ended. And that is what baptism is. It is a symbolization of the rebirth of Christ. We go into the water, we die, and we are reborn coming out of the water. And it was a very spiritual time, and I have received a lot of blessings due to that. But like I said, it's always comes down to a do as I say, not as I do. It's like, I'll say all these great things, and I'll even do all of these great things, but I'm still battling my natural man. I'm still sinning on a regular, not as much as before, but still. We strive to be these better people. And the best way I have found to do that is through Christ. I have tried without it, and I have failed miserably. I haven't achieved some wild success since I've been baptized, but I guess more of a spiritual win. I don't know why I'm laughing. I'm thinking of that movie, The Internship, where they're interns at Google, and is it Vince Vaughn? Something like that. And he says they're doing these challenges to get this job over at Google, and he says, even though they didn't win the challenge, he says, well, I feel like it was a spiritual win. And then the guy who is hosting the challenge says, well, maybe you'll land a spiritual job. Anyway, like I'm saying, it's not some wild success. Not some wild success story like, oh, I was reborn and I became wealthy and all of that. I got all of this knowledge, and what, my life did change. I can say that. And but yeah, we try to do these things sometimes, a lot of times, all the time, we can't do it alone. That is one thing that I learned. We do one thing and we say another, we do another, not unlike King David. King David, who we have been learning about, is a great man of war. He is a faithful servant of God. David led his men to defeat countless enemies. Gosh, how can we count them? 200 Philistines in 1 Samuel chapter 18, verse 27. Or how about the 40,700 Arameans hired by the Ammonites in 2 Samuel chapter 10, verse 18? Or how about an additional 27,000 Arameans under Hadadezer in 2 Samuel chapter 8, verse 4? Or even, how about the 20,000 Israelites under Absalom in 2 Samuel chapter 18? Or even the 18,000 Edomites, 2 Samuel chapter 8, verse 13. And these are just his physical strength, war, battle, victories. This is not including his spiritual wins. David has had many spiritual wins, but you know what? He's also had many spiritual downfalls. And we learn about these. And I can tell you, as I was reading these, and I don't know, maybe you too, but I have a bad habit of comparing myself to kind of putting myself in their shoes. And I'm reading of David, and he is the great David who defeated Goliath. He has done all these wonders. I've held him in such high esteem, and he's become this heroic figure. And as David starts to sin, he starts to crack. He starts to show that he is not perfect, that David is human. And there are instances where I found myself kind of looking down, I guess. Kind of like, oh my gosh, how could he do that? How could he do this? You know, or, and all it takes is that one moment. For example, 2 Samuel chapter 11, verses 1 through 27. This is when King David, commits adultery with Bathsheba, which we'll get into. But for my story's sake, we're going to get into it real quick, just for a quick story time here. And just that one sin among all of those great things, I found myself saying, wow, how could he do that? And then I'm thinking, even back to Saul. Saul was a man of great faith too. Saul was this figure who the Israelites asked for as a king, and God gave the Israelites what he thought they wanted. A fine physical human specimen of a man, tall, good looking, and he thought, okay, yeah, here is your king. And Samuel had already warned them, you don't want a king. You don't want to ask God for a king because this is what will happen, A, B, and C. And they didn't care. They said, we want a king. And they got Saul. And for a moment, he was very faithful. He was respectful. He was a good king. And just like David, he started to fall to sin. And just as I was reading David, same as I'm reading Saul, I'm like, okay, how could he do that? Oh my goodness, what a terrible human being. And then I really got to reflecting. And I'm thinking, wait a minute, if this is terrible, if this is bad, then I'm way worse than these two. I would consider myself a lot more evil than that. I don't commit adultery. I'm not trying to say that. But I am a man. and I have a natural man in me, and I have instincts, I have wants, I have needs, I have almost animal instincts, and I look at myself and I'm like, geez, I am way worse than what I'm reading from King Saul or King David. And here I am thinking, passing judgment on them, thinking, oh wow, my, how the mighty have fallen. And allowing myself to reflect on these stories, I'm like, wow, okay, yeah, I am way worse than that. If that is bad, then I am, oh boy, I don't even want to get into that, because I think a lot worse. I don't do a lot worse. I'm not some criminal or some tyrant or something like that, but my natural man in me completely identifies with them, and I feel like goes a step further. If I if I had the capability, resources, and opportunity as these kings have had, I would not put it past myself to do wild things. And luckily, possibly God knows this, which is why I have very limited resources, no success, and no opportunity. So I'm kind of protected in that way, I guess would be a positive way to look at my life situation. But that is what we're talking about here in today's lesson. We are talking about 2 Samuel, chapters 11 through 12. And then we're going to get into 1 Kings. And we're going to jump around here in 1 Kings. We're going to begin in Kings chapter 3. We are going to then jump to 1 Kings chapter 6. And then we're going to do 6, 7, 8, and 9. And then we're going to stop. We are going to jump from there and we're going to go to chapter 11. And we are going to talk about Solomon. And just as I was talking before David, I mentioned that sometimes I don't have that wisdom. I don't have that strength and that power. Well, we're going to learn about Solomon, who asks God for something very surprising, something very faithful, something very wise. And we'll get into that. But for now, I want to thank you once again for making it this far into the podcast. We're going to begin our Bible study portion. So if you're driving, just sit back, relax. If you're sitting down and you have your Bible available, we are on 2 Samuel chapter 11. And in chapter 11, this is David and Bathsheba. And we already mentioned before in my little story that David commits adultery. David does the unspeakable, the most horrible. There I go again, right? I'm putting him in that super dark light. And I'm wondering if you do the same. Maybe not only just to David, maybe not to David, but other people. You ever look at that person and pass that judgment on them and thinking, boy, that's what they do? Oh boy, sheesh, what a terrible person. I don't know how they do that. And right now we have an opportunity to reflect. And I believe that's what the Bible does for us, right? I've mentioned this in past episodes, we're reading the Bible, but what's actually happening is the Bible is reading us. So as I'm going through my Bible study, I hope that you're going through your Bible study and you are reading something different. We're reading the same words, but we're not being told the same things, which is why I really hope this podcast kind of inspires and motivates others to open up their Bibles and get into that Bible study habit, because I'm telling you, great things happen. Great opportunities for reflection, personal growth, and spiritual growth will be unlocked, because now we're reading, okay, David, King David, the mighty David, we're reading his weakness. We're like, oh, okay, we knew he wasn't perfect, or did we? Maybe, I kind of thought he was, but now I'm kind of shocked. I'm like, oh, okay, he's human as human can be, Like, I feel like I've known David's in the past. Now I feel like David could be my neighbor. David is my coworker. David is no longer set upon that pedestal, and I can look at David and I can take his lessons to heart now. It's almost like before he was unimaginable, unobtainable figure that I just could not relate to. I'm like, oh yeah, that's David. You know what? How can I learn from David? Because that's David. He does all these great things, and me, I'm me. But we're getting a good look into one of his weaknesses, and it's women. Like so many of us, natural men. I know. I know. We all know. And what's happening is David gets a good look at Bathsheba on this rooftop, and she's bathing, she's beautiful, and David is attracted to her, and he sends out for her. I'm going to give you guys the cliff notes. And David ends up getting Bathsheba pregnant. And then what happens is Bathsheba sends word back, and she says to David that I am pregnant. And so these two are sending messages back and forth. He sent a message to Uriah, who is Bathsheba's husband, right? They're both married. They're both adulterers. So David is worried now. He's like, oh boy, I got this woman pregnant. I know her husband. He's a good warrior of mine, probably a good friend. And he tells Joab to send me Uriah, the Hittite, husband of Bathsheba. And Joab sent him to David. And when Uriah came to him, David asked him how Joab was, how the soldiers were doing, and how the war was going. He's real casual conversation. He said, hey, buddy, oh pal, how are things going? And David has this plan. To send Uriah home. And he thinks it's a great plan. He thinks he can send Uriah home to his newly discovered pregnant wife that he does not know about. He will go home, he will make love to his wife, and then, however long it takes, Bathsheba will tell Uriah, I am with child, I am pregnant. And Uriah would be happy. He would be none the wiser. He would be ecstatic with a new child on the way, sent away from the war that he was endangered in, because David sent him home for this great blessing. And he was able to go make love to his wife and bear a child. And now things are great. And now he will never know that that child was King David's. But that does not work out the way that he thought it would. None of that happens. In fact, after the meeting that David and Uriah had, he told him to go to your house, kick back, hang out with your wife, make love. You're done. You don't have to fight in this war anymore. Well, Uriah did not go home. He told David that he doesn't want to go. And David asked him, why? Why? Haven't you just come from a military campaign? Why don't you want to go home? And Uriah, a faithful servant to God, tells David, the ark and Israel and Judah are staying in tents, and my commander Joab and my Lord's men are camped in the open country. How could I go to my house to eat and drink and make love to my wife? As surely as you live, I will not do such a thing. He's like, these are my people. This is my God. These are my men. That's my commander. I am in this till the end. He's loyal to all of them. And David said to him, stay here one more day, and tomorrow I'll send you back. And at David's invitation, he stayed, he ate, he drank. What happened next was David's new cunning plan. That next morning, David wrote a letter to Joab, and he sent it to Uriah, and he wrote, put Uriah out in the front where the fighting is the fiercest. Then withdraw from him, so he will be struck down and die. He's telling him to go put him in the worst part of the battle and retreat and leave him there. Let him fight on his own. And that is exactly what he does. And Uriah dies in battle because David's shame, his sin, caused him to do that evil thing. Right now, reflecting my personal reflection on this, I don't think I would do something like that. But at the same time, there's other things I would do. And it's a mixed bag of feelings. I don't know how you feel about that, right? Oh, he's so terrible. How could he do that? Well, I'll tell you, you're not alone in that feeling. Not alone. God shares that feeling. God is very disappointed. As you can imagine, God is watching. God is with David. God is in the battle. And he saw how faithful Uriah was to him, to his family, to his friends, to his commander, to the war at hand. And he is not happy with David for sending him off to the slaughter. And he's certainly not happy for taking his wife. In fact, so much so that the Lord sends Nathan, the prophet, to David. And Nathan is giving David some counsel. And David is about to hear a parable from Nathan. And Nathan tells David the story. It's a parable. It's a story meant to teach. And he got this from God. God told Nathan, tell David this. I have a message. Let David know what I'm telling you. And Nathan goes to David and he tells David this story. And Nathan says, there were two men in a certain town, one rich and the other poor. The rich man had a very large number of sheep and cattle, but the poor man had nothing except one little ewe lamb that he had bought. He raised this one lamb, and it grew up with him and his children. It shared his food, it drank from his cup, and even slept in his arms. It was like a daughter to him. Now, a traveler came to the rich man, but the rich man refrained from taking one of his own sheep or cattle to prepare a meal for the traveler who had come to him. Instead of taking one of his many, they say a large number of sheep. Now it says, instead, he took his ewe lamb that belonged to the poor man and prepared it for the one who had come to him. So instead of taking one of his large number of cattle or sheep, he took the man's one beloved, basically family member, like a pet, a loved one who shared meals, shared the bed, slept in his arms. He took that sheep, killed it, and served it to the traveler to eat. Now David is burning at anger from this story. He said, as surely as the Lord lives, the man who did this must die. David is heated. He is upset. He can't believe what this rich man has done to this poor man. He goes on to say he must pay for that lamb 4 times over because he did such a thing and had no pity. Nathan looks at David. Nathan says to David, you are that man. This is what the Lord, the God of Israel says. He says, I anointed you king over Israel and I delivered you from the hand of Saul. I gave you your master's house to you and your master's wives to your arms. I gave you all of Israel and Judah. And if all this had been too little, I would have given you more. Why did you despise the word of the Lord by doing what is evil in his eyes? You struck down Uriah the Hittite with the sword and took his wife to be your own. And worst of all, you killed him with the sword of the Ammonites. And he says, now therefore, the sword will never depart from your house because you despised me and took the wife of the Uriah the Hittite to be your own. So side note here, something very interesting that I came across. If you noticed what David told Nathan, he told Nathan when he heard that story, and he was super upset. And he said, surely this man must die. In fact, he says that this man must pay for that lamb 4 times over, because he did such a thing and had no pity. Well, God was listening. And when Nathan said, that's you, King David, he basically summed up his own consequence. Because now, God has sentenced David to 4 consequences. And those 4 consequences is 1, the sword shall never depart from your house. That means, you live by the sword, you die by the sword. So he's living by the sword. That means that sword is not leaving his house, his family. The house is his family. Number 2, the punishment is evil would arise from within David's own family. Punishment number 3, David's wives would be taken by another publicly. And 4, the child born from adultery would die. And, of course, these consequences follow through the rest of David's life and into the next generation. Amnon assaults Tamar. Absalom kills Ammon. Absalom rebels against David. Adonijah attempts to take the throne. Adonijah is eventually executed. All of these examples come from the 4 consequences that God had given David. So now we are in 1 Kings. We're gonna go over chapter 3. Now we already learned David is now passed away. Solomon, his son, from Bathsheba, and Solomon, who is the son of Bathsheba and Solomon, is now king. And we talked before about how sometimes we don't have the right resources, strength, wisdom, or that power or opportunity to do so. Well, you know what? Solomon does something very interesting here. And it's because, I think, what his dad told him. See, before this, David gives Solomon some advice. David tells Solomon to be faithful to God. He tells him to be wise. He gives him the knowledge he wished he followed. David gave a charge to Solomon. And this is not 1 Kings chapter 3. This is actually, I'm going off the rails here because I think it's important. We're going back a chapter into chapter 2 when David is telling Solomon, I am about to go the way of the earth. So be strong, act like a man, observe what the Lord your God requires, walk in obedience to him, and keep his decrees and commands, his laws and regulations as written in the laws of Moses. Do this, and you may prosper in all that you do and wherever you go, and that the Lord may keep his promise to me. If your descendants watch how they live, and if they walk faithfully before me with all their heart and soul, you will never fail to have a successor on the throne of Israel. And that was the promise that God made to David, and David is now giving his son Solomon this charge. He's giving him some great advice. And Solomon is no fool. Well, we will get into that, but he is heeding his father's advice, because we're going to get into chapter 3, and I think this is one of my most favorite stories, I think, so far anyway, because Solomon makes an alliance with the Pharaoh king of Egypt and married his daughter, and he brought her into the city of David, and he finished building his palace. So we're kind of getting a sneak peek into the house of the Lord, the temple that Solomon is going to build, the house that God told David is going to be built. When David said, I will build you this house, and God says, you're not going to build me a house. I will build you a house. This is what's happening here. Solomon is kind of giving us that hint of what's happening here. He is building that temple of the Lord. But, people are still sacrificing at the high places. The temple isn't built yet, but, Solomon is showing his love to the Lord. He is giving sacrifices, burning incense on the high places, and Solomon offered 1,000 burnt offerings on that altar. And then the Lord appeared to Solomon during the night in a dream, and God said, "Ask me for anything." He says, "Ask for whatever you want me to give to you." And Solomon answered, "You have shown great kindness to your servant, my father David, because he was faithful to you and righteous and upright in heart. You have continued this great kindness to him, and you have given him a son to sit on his throne this very day. Now, Lord my God, you may have your servant king in place of my father David, but I am only a little child and do not know how to carry out my duties. Your servant is here among the people you have chosen, a great people too, numerous to count or number. So give your servant a discerning heart to govern your people, to distinguish between right and wrong. For who is able to govern this great people of yours?" And the Lord was very pleased. The Lord was pleased at Solomon that he had asked for this. So God said to him, "Since you have asked for this, and not for long life or wealth for yourself, nor have you asked for the death of your enemies, but for discernment in administering justice, I will do what you have asked. I will give you a wise and discerning heart, so that there will never have been anyone like you, nor will there ever be. Moreover, I will give you what you have not asked for, both wealth and honor, so that in your lifetime you will have no equal among kings. If you walk," this part's important, "and if you walk in obedience to me and keep my decrees and commands, as David your father did, I will give you a long life." Then Solomon awoke, and he realized it had been a dream. Or was it? So we just read his covenant. They both made covenants to each other. And I really like how God doesn't focus on the things that made him angry about David. There's no bad blood. There's nothing personal taken. There's no, because David in the beginning, Solomon in the beginning, he's like, "You have shown great kindness to your servant, my father, because he is a faithful and righteous and upright in your heart." Solomon is revealing his thoughts of his dad. That's how he sees his dad. And God, instead of saying, "Well, there are things you don't know. David was good, but he wasn't all that." He's not human. This is not a human response. It's so Christ-like. It's like, yeah, okay. You love your father. That is your father's light in your eyes. I'll let you keep that light. And he tells Solomon that if you walk in obedience to me and keep my decrees and commands, as David your father did, he kind of goes along with that Christ-like lead. It feels me. If I were in that position, like I said, I'm terrible. I'm worse than Saul. I'm worse than David. I'm way more evil compared to what we're reading of them and their strong faith. And I would be more of like, yeah, well, your dad was good, but he didn't keep all of his commands. And maybe you can be more obedient. I'm not saying that I'd be jumping on the opportunity, but the thought would be in the back of my mind. I'm like, okay, yeah, right. If you do better than your dad, because your dad made a lot of mistakes, kid. And But I just wanted to point out that little tidbit that stuck out to me, and I thought it was very interesting that God keeps David in that shining light in the eyes of his son, even though, if he did walk in obedience and keep all his decrees and commands, it's almost like a do as he says, not as your father says, or do as he says, not as your father did, kind of a thing. I think that's very interesting, because obviously David was no saint, but God does not bring up anything like that. He keeps that shining example of a great king in the new king, Solomon. And he says, okay, do this. Yep, do as your father did. Exactly. That's right. Be like your father who walked in obedience and kept his decrees and kept my commands and never did me any wrong and all of this stuff. And that is what you must do now. And this is what I'll give you. And so King Solomon thinks this was all a dream. Well, something happens. Now the king must solve a problem. He has to make a ruling. These two women, it says these two prostitutes, they had a problem. All right, these two women, they lived in the same house. They both had a baby. And one night, one woman's son died because she laid on him. So these two women, they're sleeping with their child. One of them rolls over on the child and kills it. Now there's one dead child, one live child. And so one of the women got up in the middle of the night and took the son from the side of one of the servants as they were sleeping and put him by the breast of the other woman and put the dead son by that side. And then the next morning, one of the women got up to nurse the son, but he was dead. One of the women pulled a switcheroony. So now the women don't know which baby is which. Well, they know which is which. Nobody else knows. Because the other woman's saying, no. That's not mine. That dead child is definitely yours. I have mine right here. He's perfectly fine. And the other woman is like, no, that is not what's happening. The first one said, no, that dead one is yours. The living one is mine. And they argued back and forth in front of the king. And the king says, okay, one of you say that my son is alive and your son is dead, while the other one says, no, your son is dead and mine is alive. I got an idea. Bring me the sword. I'm going to solve this for you two. And they brought the sword to the king, and he gave an order, cut the child in half. Give one half to the other child. Give one half to one woman, and give the other half to the other woman. So you can imagine what is going on in this room right now. He has just given the order to kill this other child, cut it in half, and split him between the two women. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm judging this other woman who smothered this child as unfit. And Solomon, King Solomon, knows this too. So he's watching these women. He is gauging them. He's feeling them out because he knows one woman is an unfit parent and the other one still loves their child. And one of the women says, yeah, neither you or I shall have him. Go ahead, cut him in two. And then the other woman says, no, please, my lord, don't kill that baby. Give her the living baby. Don't kill him. So King Solomon says, give the living baby to the first woman. Do not kill him. She is his mother. And just like that, Solomon used all that wisdom, all of the discernment to rule out justice. And it came upon him just as the Holy Spirit comes upon us. So now I'm sure Solomon, King Solomon, is rethinking that was just a dream. And he did have a covenant, an agreement with God, and life as he knew it has changed. Just as life as we know it changed. When we make covenants, we are not so different. Life changes for us just as it does King Solomon. We make those covenants. We keep those covenants. We can take these same covenants, walk in obedience, keep God's decrees and commands. Maybe we can take a lesson in what we ask for, what we set out for, what we strive to accomplish. Is it riches? Is it power? Maybe we should be going for some discernment, maybe some wisdom. Maybe we should be asking for other things in our lives. Maybe we're asking for the wrong things in our lives. All right, let's grab our Bibles, and we are moving to 1 Kings chapter 6. And lo and behold, Solomon builds the temple, and this is famous Solomon's temple, the Temple of Solomon, which is actually the most holy place, the Holy of Holies, that housed the Ark of the Covenant. This is the moment we've been waiting for. This is the temple of the Lord. It took 7 years to build. It's made of cedar and gold. It's got extensively detailed plans. It is a beautiful, magnificent architectural wonder. And if we are thinking back to what I said about how God allowed David to remain shining in Solomon's life, when he says, you do these things, you be obedient, and you keep your covenants, and you don't anger me, and you're super good, just like your dad was, then you get all of these things. And God tells Solomon, if you walk in my statutes, then I will perform my word with you. What is God trying to accomplish here? Is he sparing his feelings? Is he tempting him? Is he doing anything other than asking for his obedience? Is God ever asking us for anything other than our obedience? And how difficult day to day to keep that simple task. It's not so simple, is it? How fast does it take for us in our day-to-day lives to forget all of the wisdom that we have tried so hard to pick up through the Bible, through scriptures, through church? Isn't it funny for those of us that go to church? I don't know about the rest of you, but for me, sometimes it can feel, as soon as I leave the doors, boom, huge flush of reality. It's like a time machine, like a portal. You just whoop, back to the real world. Everybody sucks again. Traffic is terrible. And it's like, oh my goodness, I climb this huge mountain, and now I'm rolling back down it. And what gets me back up that mountain? Scriptures. I open up the Bible. I put whatever I'm studying, whatever's in my plan, my lesson plan, and I just go through it. And maybe I'll put on some gospel music, and so often it just gets thrown out the window, which is why we go every week, which is why I go every week, which is why we're involved in so much church activities, which is why we do the best that we can in our community to do more of these activities and experiences, so that we remember. We don't forget to be obedient. We don't forget the word. We don't forget why we're here, what we're doing. Because it is so easy to forget, so easy to be disobedient. Jesus Christ called his body the temple. And that is what has been built here, just as Jesus Christ asked for our obedience. All right, and as we move on to chapter 7, this is 1 Kings chapter 7. Now, we learned about the temple being built, which took 7 years, but now we are reading about Solomon's palace. Solomon's palace, who took 13 years to build. Why did one take 7 years to build and one took 13 years to build? I mean, that's a little strange. Maybe he was more in a rush? Maybe there was more of an urgency to get the temple built? Maybe there was more time to be spent on his own once the temple was built? Maybe I'll put a little bit more time, maybe a little more effort, because not only did it take longer to build, it was bigger as well. The temple was 90 feet long, and Solomon's palace was 150 feet long. The temple was 30 feet wide, 45 feet high. The palace was 75 feet wide and 45 feet high. So it is bigger. It is bigger. It took longer. It looks like the materials are better in the temple. So in the temple, the floors are made of juniper. They're covered in gold, and the whole interior covered with cedar and overlaid with gold. And in Solomon's palace, the throne hall covered from floor to ceiling with cedar, just cedar. So I don't know, they don't specifically give us any information of why the differences between the two are as they are. You'd almost think that it would be opposite. You'd want to spend more time on the holiest of holies, make that bigger, make it more pronounced, more special. I mean, to me, like, the materials seem better. Like, there's gold, more gold, but they don't say specifically. They don't get into why it is the way it is in the comparison against the temple versus the palace. They don't get into all of that. But what's interesting is they do talk about two pillars that were placed in Solomon's palace that was named Jachin and Boaz. Boaz as in Boaz and Ruth, as in Boaz, the redeemer of Ruth. And that is a very interesting fact. But also, interestingly enough, they don't mention anything, any resemblance, any relationship, any connection towards Boaz and Ruth. A lot of interpreters just believe it's meant to reflect the meaning of its name, which is strength. Boaz means strength. It could be a wild coincidence. I don't think so. I think there's a meaning in there. I think there's a definite connection in there, because Boaz was the redeemer who preserved David's family line. David, Solomon's dad. And eventually, Jesus Christ is coming from this line. And the pillar of Boaz stood at the entrance of the temple. And it represents God's strength, faithfulness. So if you're wondering what's the connection, they don't say. But we can kind of piece that together ourselves, because I don't think that it's a wild coincidence. But it's important to also remember that the temple is no slouch. It's a beautiful holy place, amazing marvel, 2 bronze pillars, the Ark of the Covenant, and the cherubim. They had the holy place and the most holy place in there. A golden altar of incense. It was an amazing, amazing place. Gold basins, wick trimmers, sprinkling bowls and dishes, censers, gold door sockets for the most holy place in the main hall, gold floral work, lamp and tongs, 10 gold lampstands, bronze shovels and sprinkling bowls, 10 bronze stands with 10 basins. This is all of the finest materials. And we kind of get this idea, this picture of who Solomon is, right? He is a man of sophistication and great taste is what I'm getting so far. From his choice of the temple to his own palace, all the way to what he asked God for. He's obviously not some brute, power-hungry madman yet. He's asking for wisdom. He's asking for discernment. He wants to understand. He wants wisdom. He wants understanding. He's an intelligent person, a faithful follower of God, and he is loyal to his father. And these are what we're picking up from Solomon so far. And now, as we are entering chapter 8, the ark is being brought to the temple. And all the Israelites come together to King Solomon at the time of the festival. And it is a celebration. It is a huge, great time. Very exciting, as you can imagine. In fact, so exciting that God's glory fills the temple in a cloud. So exciting that the priest cannot continue ministering because God's presence is so overwhelming. And this reminds me, actually it brings up a question. Have you ever felt that overwhelming spirit that makes you stop in your tracks? Maybe it makes you almost cry. Maybe it makes you take in this wild, spontaneous breath. If you're a reader, you've probably come across that one famous line in all of the books is, I released a breath I didn't know I was holding. Maybe you have an experience where you came across a presence or a time or an experience that was so overwhelming that you just had to stop, think, catch your breath, do whatever you needed to. For me, I had this experience. It was while singing in church choir, and it was an overwhelming feeling. The song was Hosanna, and it was an overwhelming urge, and I had to, I loved singing that song, but I had to stop. Because I couldn't. I just froze. There was an overwhelming presence. And that is what this passage, scripture, makes me feel or reminds me about. And Solomon prays a prayer of dedication to this temple. And he prays for forgiveness. He prays for mercy. He prays for justice. He prays for future generations. And he prays for foreigners who seek God. What are we praying for in our days, in our nights, in our lives? Is it forgiveness, mercy, for justice? Is it for our families, our future generations? Or is it for people who we feel need to feel God's presence, who needs to come to the fold? Do we pray for people to take that next step in their church towards a church or bettering their lives? Do we pray for the people? And in 1 Kings chapter 8, verse 27, it says, "But will God indeed dwell on earth? Behold, heaven and the highest heaven cannot contain you." We are reading that Solomon understands that God is great. God is greater than any building. And the temple gets dedicated. And it says, "Then the king and all Israel with him offered sacrifices before the Lord. Solomon offered a sacrifice of fellowship offerings to the Lord, 22,000 cattle and 120,000 sheep and goats. So the king and all the Israelites dedicated the temple." It also says that they celebrated it before the Lord our God for 7 days and 7 days more, 14 days in all. And it just reminds me of when we were trying to compare the two, the temple and Solomon's palace, and we're like, why did it take 7 years and 13 years for the other one? And it's pretty close, isn't it? 7 seems to be a very favored number in the Bible. 7 days to create earth, 7 years to create the temple. They celebrated for 7 days, and then it says that they celebrated for 7 more for a total of 14. It's like I said, there's a lot of wild coincidences. And when all of the festivities were done, both buildings were built, the consecrations were complete, the dedications are over, The prayer has been said. Our Lord God returns to King Solomon. But this time, God gives King Solomon somewhat of a warning. A warning and a reminder. God tells King Solomon, I heard the prayer and plea you have made before me. I've consecrated this temple which you have built. By putting my name there forever, my eyes and my heart will always be there. But as for you, if you walk before me faithfully, with integrity of heart and uprightness, as David your father did, and do all the commands and observe my decrees and laws, I will establish a royal throne over Israel forever. Just as I promised David your father, when I said you shall never fail to have a successor on the throne of Israel. But if you or your descendants turn away from me and do not observe the commands and decrees I have given you, then I will cut off Israel from the land that I have given them and will reject this temple. God is telling he's warning him, he's like, yes, okay, this is great, but don't forget. Why do you think this feels like the second reminder that he has mentioned to him in his visits to King Solomon? And why could he possibly be so concerned that they will turn against God and once again turn to idolatry and worship other gods? I don't know. Maybe because that is the reoccurring pattern that we have seen all throughout Judges and basically the entire Old Testament, right? And God's like, well, this happened before and I'm a little concerned. So I'm going to remind you, don't do this. They have a tendency to do it, and I have delivered them from Egypt before, and they have done it before and again. So I'm just letting you know, if you happen to fall the way of Israel, then there will be consequences and judgment will come. Basically, temple or no temple, judgment will come. And that was the warning that was given. And I gotta say, King Solomon's reign, I believe, was the most wealthiest, most prosperous. We never touched on this, but King Solomon established trade lines. He opened up trade routes, and there were materials going all over Israel, all over the land. And it was a very prosperous place. And that was all thanks to what he asked God for. His discernment, his wisdom, his intelligence. And it was all part of what God said. That God said he was going to give Solomon even the things that he didn't ask for. So I just thought that was fun to bring up really quick, because we didn't touch up on that, is that he did establish a very prosperous, a very wealthy kingdom. King Solomon, he's wise, and like God said, he's going to give him a lot of power, he's going to give him a lot of wealth, and that is exactly what we are reading in the last chapter of our study this week. And unfortunately, it ends up being the downfall of Solomon. Solomon succumbed to the excess wealth, women, and all of this other things. And well, he had a lot of wealth. He owned that large palace. He owned huge quantities of food and livestock. He owned 12,000 horses. He owned 4,000 stalls for chariot horses. He received 666 talents of gold every year. Don't ask me why that's the number. Wild coincidence. Isn't that interesting? 666, the number, a representation of Satan, which means Satan means adversary. And we're reading of King Solomon's downfall, which was his wealth and greed. And we're reading that he received 666 talents of gold every year. That's kind of wild. He got 240 talents of gold from Ophir and Sheba. That's about 20 and a half tons. 500 gold shields. And, like I said, King Solomon established trading ships that they bring him gold and silver and ivory, animals like apes and baboons. All of household articles were pure gold, golden goblets. He received revenues from merchants, from traders and governors, Arabian kings even. He dealt in precious stones, even spices, herbs, spices, large quantities of it. Ivory and gold thrown. We are talking huge amounts of wealth. And that is King Solomon. And that is what we need to remember here. Because what went wrong? Right? Solomon was a great king. Great king. But what do you think went wrong? What were the warnings given? What could possibly have been the downfall of the great King Solomon? Could it have been the same downfall as many others before him? Because King Solomon also married many foreign women. He also loved his women. A lot of women. King Solomon had 700 wives and 300 concubines. And along with the wealth and the greed, I believe this was more of his downfall. Because we've read this with other kings, many wives, and they've never ended well. It always ended in jealousy or some sort of terrible thing happening, dramas, and in this case, what happened was God's warning. Once again, they turned to idolatry. And not so much Solomon, but his wives. And he allowed all their gods and idols into Israel. And God specifically warned them. That was that chapter, was that 2 chapters ago, that not to do this. But they built places of worship, idolatry, for like these gods that other people worship, like Ashtoreth, Chemosh, Molech, who is like a god often associated with children sacrifices. There is a lot to be taken in here. So much. And a lot of lessons. We can look at King Solomon and how fast things have changed. The ups and the downs. A person can have wisdom, wealth, success, and even build great things for God, but yet still fail if they stop guarding their heart, if they stop following God's law and decrees. This reminds me of what Samuel told Saul in 1 Samuel chapter 15 verse 22, and he says, to obey is better than sacrifice. We can take that scripture and we can make it say, to obey is better than blank, blank, blank. Fill in that blank. What have we learned throughout this study? I think the main topic would be obedience. What God has asked for, what Solomon has done, what he hasn't done, King David, what he's done, what God has asked for, what Samuel has told Saul, to obey is better than to blank. And I think we can fill in that blank every day when we're at those crossroads. To obey is better than to. And in chapter 11, we read that Solomon reigned over Jerusalem, over all of Israel, 40 years, just as David. 40 is another very popular number. It's always 40 years, 40 days, 40 years. And it says, then he rested with his ancestors and was buried in the city of David, his fathers. And Rehoboam, his son, succeeded him as king. And why is that important? Well, it's important because of God's judgment. He said there would be judgment, didn't he? And because of his disobedience, the kingdom will be torn away. However, for David's sake, Solomon keeps the kingdom during his lifetime. But his son will lose most of it. And that will set us up for next week's Bible study. And I thank you for joining me once again on this week's Bible study. I hope that we left you with a lot to think about, a lot to ponder. I hope that you were able to enjoy some nice reflection, some thinking time in your day. And we hope to see you next week.
Have a great day. Aloha.